Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us again. Lots of interesting stuff to talk about today. The shootings in Colorado have a lot of people talking about the need for more gun control laws. We'll talk about that and whether the shooter himself deserves the death penalty. We'll talk about the penalties given Penn State. It sends a message, but will it really change anything at all in college sports? And we'll talk about the city of Milwaukee handing out even more benefits to city employees. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have longtime newspaper columnist Joel McNally. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. You know Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional, and education consultant and local job creation expert Gerard Randall. Rick Horowitz is going to be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, the first thing we'll talk about is what's happened in the week since the tragic shooting at the Colorado movie theater. No decision yet on whether prosecutors will ask for the death sentence, which is allowed in Colorado. And there's been a huge amount of talk about the possibility of enacting stricter gun control laws, though many think the pro-gun lobby is way too strong to let that happen. Do you think that'll just die unless Obama gets reelected, and then maybe it'll be brought up when he doesn't have anything to lose?
No, well, there will be an effort to keep as little politicalization of this as they possibly can. But now you've gotten it in the arena of conversation where you do have people who are left of gun rights and right of gun rights to the degree that they're pure libertarians. Let everybody have guns no matter what kind of guns they are. I personally, I'm baffled as to why assault rifles aren't just totally eliminated from ownership. There has been some effort in some states to do that. There's been some federal effort around it. And frankly, in this particular situation, that wasn't even the issue. But it does bring up the conversation again around what is the appropriate kind of restriction that one should have around gun ownership. With regards to the death penalty, I do think that's going to bring out the worst in all of us, because clearly this guy has some real issues. I don't see him spending the rest of his life in a mental institution, but he does need treatment, and he needs treatment in a secure facility. The death penalty, it's pure retribution. And my guess is there will be a lot of folk who will be calling out for it, but I don't see that in Colorado that's going to happen.
Denise, so many people are saying right now there is no reason for anybody to possess a semi-automatic assault rifle that fires off 60 shots in 1 minute. Will that be enough to persuade lawmakers to say, well, maybe that's right?
It should be, but I don't think that it will be. There's also no reason for anybody to be able to carry magazines that carry hundreds of rounds of ammunition in one clip. There's no need for private citizens to have assault weapons that are similar or in some cases identical to those that our military uses. That simply is not a need. It's something that, quite frankly, I think takes the idea of the right to bear arms to an absolute extreme that I do not believe our forefathers intended for us to be able to use. I don't have a problem with the Second Amendment. I have a problem when we're allowing individuals to buy assault weapons over the internet in private sales out of the back of somebody's trunk or the back of their truck at gun shows without the appropriate work that needs to be done in terms of background checks. This individual was under the care of a psychiatrist for some serious mental issues, but he was able to buy these weapons. He was able to order, I mean, this is another thing that's crazy, to order over the internet 6,000 rounds of ammunition. That's not somebody who's doing a little target practice. That's somebody who's planning to assault individuals or to start his or her own war. In this country, we have got to use some of the common sense that our founding fathers thought we would have about what the right to bear arms means. And the right to bear arms, I don't believe our forefathers thought would allow people to buy assault weapons, to buy thousands of rounds of ammunition without any kinds of questions being asked. If we don't, but I'll tell you, Dan, if our legislators don't do something about this, we can guarantee, unfortunately, There's going to be another situation like this, just as there have been before these, where we sit around and we all ask each other, how in the world did this happen? How do people have access to these kind of assault weapons? And we don't have the courage to stand up and do it. This is going to happen again, and it's on our shoulders.
But Kevin, a lot of people also say no matter how many laws you have, there's no way you can stop some sick and or evil person like this.
Correct, and we do have strong gun laws, and I don't see the logic where if you enact even more restrictions and cut away and chop away at the Second Amendment, is that really going to stop what happened in Aurora? Is that really going to stop an evil person, a criminal, from getting his hands on guns and obeying those stricter gun laws? Not going to happen. Not going to happen. I agree with you, Denise, that there will not be a lot of discussion about clamping down on gun ownership because it's just not in the makeup of either party right now. And Joel alluded to his disappointment with the president last week. He's having some overtures now this week that maybe we should discuss this, but I don't see any strong effort on either side of the aisle about going after stricter gun laws. I don't think they work because criminals just ignore them. And as far as the death penalty is concerned, I think I might be the only proponent here of this is really a strong case for it because you have someone, there's no ands, ifs, or buts. We know he's the guilty person. We know he's the shooter. We have a multitude of eyewitnesses. And if the worst mass shooting in our country's history isn't reason enough to execute this guy, I don't know what is.
Obama's not going to talk about gun control during campaign mode, but if he was reelected, would you be that surprised if all of a sudden he brought it up then when he didn't have much to lose?
He hasn't talked about it for 4 years. And neither has the Republican Party, and for the same reason, because of the political power of the National Rifle Association over both parties. It still takes my breath away every time Kevin and his favorite senator, Senator Ron Johnson, this past week on Fox News, even flabbergasted Chris Wallace when Senator Johnson said buying a 100-round magazine is a right of an American. No, it's not. At the time the Second Amendment was written, we didn't have 100-round magazines. We didn't have guns that would shoot 50 and 60 rounds within a minute. And this has no purpose for hunting. It has no purpose for self-defense. No one needs to defend their home against an army. It doesn't make, the only purpose of these guns is mass murder, period. And if we don't have politicians in this country who have the courage to outlaw weapons of mass murder after continued mass murders, our political system simply doesn't work. Because there are far more intelligent people in this country than there are ignorant people parroting Ron Johnson or even what Kevin just said, talking about chipping away at rights. There's no right to become a mass murderer. There's a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's written out pretty plainly. And these weapons deny that in large numbers of people. And the only purpose of them is to get rid of large numbers of people. It's to murder large numbers of people.
There has to be a balance, though.
That's not a balance. It's not a balance to allow these weapons to be sold.
And I believe that a lot of gun owners fear that if you're going to go after some of the weapons and guns that we've talked about on this program, that incrementally, eventually, you're going to go after the guy in his house that has guns and
that
weapons.
That is the argument of the National Rifle Association. And it's a stupid argument, and it's accepted by stupid people.
I think it's very credible, and unlike you, I don't think that gun owners in America today are stupid people.
All right. Next topic. Let's talk for just a few minutes about the penalties given by the NCAA to Penn State for not doing enough to protect children from molester Jerry Sandusky. Does this send a strong and crystal clear message to athletic programs around the country that protecting innocent children is much, much more important, Denise, than protecting lucrative college sports programs?
It does, and I hope it also sends the message that in this case with Penn State, it was an issue involving children, but it could be an issue involving young women. It could be an issue involving drugs or drug use. The message that I believe they sent was, if you've got a problem and you know about it, you better do everything you can to clean it up, because if it reaches this level and we become engaged, this is what's going to happen to you. And in some ways, I think the penalties that the NCAA meted out to Penn State are actually worse than the death penalty. It cuts right to the core of so much that this university identified itself with, removing Joe Paterno's victories, really limiting their access to college bowls, cutting back on the number of scholarships that they needed to do. Penn State was expecting sudden death. It was expecting that's what's going to get. And this, I think what the NCAA actually though did is something that was much more painful to them than sudden death could ever be, because this is going to go on for it's going to have impact on them for decades and decades. And the $60 million that the university has to pay out to address issues surrounding victims and victims' rights.
Will athletic departments around the country from this point forward realize, okay, we're not the most important thing. The mission of this institution is to educate and protect young people? Or will they forget this 6 months from now and say, we got to fill those stands?
No, it won't be forgotten. And because of the severity of the penalty, they know that the NCAA can now level. I think there will be some other areas where they'll be a lot more cautious, or they'll think a lot more carefully before they dip down that road, coaches in particular. But my problem with all of it, severe as it was, justified as it was, it didn't punish those most that should have been punished. So they take away Joe Paterno's victories, going back to 1998.
That's an
He's
asterisk.
Dead.
That's symbolic.
It's symbolic. They $60 million, that was heavy. But who's going to end up paying that? Taxpayers, because the state university insurance companies are already starting to balk, because they know that if they start paying part of this now, there will be lots of lawsuits that are going to come up that they will be exposed to. So they're backing off on making even initial payments. Then you're asking donors to kick the money in. You've got the football players. They had nothing to do with this. And they're the ones that are being tarnished. They're the ones who are not able to play with a program that they may have committed to. It won't be easy for them, unless there are superstars on the team, to transfer to other schools. The trustees who were asleep at the wheel, they should have been the ones that bore the brunt of this, along with whatever coaches or administrative officials had privy to this information and failed to act on it. They did not bear the brunt of the penalties that were leveled, while others who had scant to do with it, they're going to pay the price for a long time, including taxpayers.
Does this help the victims at all, Joel?
I can't see how exactly. I mean, I'm glad that there was substantial penalty, and that, everyone, the situation was so unbelievable that it could have gone on, and that responsible people could have made the decisions they made to cover things up. I can't imagine you'll ever have much of a situation like that again. This seemed like so weird, and I'm glad they're getting a substantial penalty, but it doesn't address the major issue, which is that major universities have become football factories. This $60 million fine, that's only 1 year's revenue from their football program. They have become football factories that have nothing to do with education. And that's what you have to deal with, and the NCAA wasn't going to deal with that ever. I mean, that's an issue that they have no interest in, the fact that our universities should be doing education instead of basically being minor league teams for professional football. But minor league teams, by the way, that doesn't bother to pay the athletes that are bringing in $60 million a year to the university. So some football players are going to get hurt. They're the last people that should get hurt. They didn't do a thing.
Right.
You're right. There are plenty of officials at that university who are totally deluded, by the dollars that come rolling in, and care about that more than education or morality or protecting children in this case. But I can't imagine it's going to be more than something that we talk about here for for a few weeks, and then things go on.
Let me add one quick thing to that $60 million, though. Football programs, basketball programs at the major universities, their revenue tends to support other sports. So when that revenue is reduced, those other sports, the non-revenue producing sports, suffer. Even if they have to kick in the money to cover the cost of the $60 million, you can bet those stands aren't going to be filled with people who want to come out and watch mediocre football that leads to nothing because they're out of bowl contention. I just think that $60 million has a ripple effect that is a harsh penalty on a lot of people who had nothing to do with it.
Kevin, if the headline said NCAA kills football program,
which I called for a couple weeks ago,
would that have had more of an impact nationally?
Yes, because I think it's so much wishful thinking for you guys that we're sending this message to other universities across the country that you better not do anything like this or you're going to suffer the consequences. The most serious penalty would have been to wipe out the football program, period. They still get to play football. They still get to be out there every Saturday afternoon. The whole idea, the rationale behind the cover-up was to protect and preserve Penn State's precious football program. And you know what? They did. It's gone on hiatus for a few years, and I'm reading some reports that the NCAA wanted to put the hammer down for 4 years, but Penn State lobbied and was able to maybe talk their way into a less serious penalty. I think if you really wanted to send a message to other universities, this would have been the time to say, look, if you engage in this kind of selfish, immoral activity that unfortunately does lead to innocent people being hurt. When you by choice engage in that kind of activity, there's far-reaching consequences. That's what's going to happen. But if you wanted to send a message, you would have imposed the death penalty because, again, I suggest, what does an athletic program have to do? What does it have to violate before you say, you know what, we are going to crack down with the use of this tool?
This is not over for Penn State, though. It's not over for Penn State.
That's
already the first civil suits, but it is. It is. Already the first civil suits are coming. Already we have key university officials, including the former president, who are facing criminal charges and will most likely be convicted on the strength of Penn State's own investigation. This is one piece of what Penn State is paying for, and it needs to pay dearly. It will, and it is.
I think they're very fortunate because they could have suffered even more severe, serious consequences and are fortunate that they did not get that death penalty.
They'll never get that reputation.
All right, next topic.
They will, but the coaches won't.
A few years ago, there was some controversy when local governments decided to give health and dental benefits to same-sex domestic partners of gay employees. This week, the city of Milwaukee took it a step further and granted benefits to all the children of domestic partners and to the domestic partners of retirees. Is this the right and moral thing, as you have all long argued, the right and moral thing to do, years too late, or is it financially not a good thing to do when every government body is looking for bucks?
It's no big financial thing. I had to really dig to look for this story when you put it on the agenda because I don't think the major newspaper even reported it in their newspaper. They reported it on a blog somewhere. It's not a controversy anymore. That's a good thing. The fact that Anderson Cooper can come out and that Sally Ride, posthumously can come out, and we know that gay individuals are just like everybody else, and they're our friends and their neighbors and all the people we work with. Not all the people we work with, many of the people we work with, many of the people in our families. The coming out is the major thing that has happened. And the fact that it has happened and people are now recognizing these aren't some people from another planet. These are people like us. These are people like our loved, and some of them are our loved ones.
So we shouldn't worry, Denise, about the financial cost of it?
We want equality. It's equal rights and equal benefits for families, and the families, of gay partners are as important as the families of heterosexual partners.
I do think there's a moral issue and there's a financial issue. And what we have to do is find out where that balance is. The city clearly has to understand what the financial issue is and say, we think this is the moral thing to do. How do we find a way to make this work so taxpayers don't find themselves, paying even more than taxpayers already are now for health insurance? And the city was able to do that in a way that was very, very reasonable. But, excuse me, we are living in these times of very tight budgets. So it's a tight balancing act that cities and other governmental bodies have to take a look at. Is it morally the right thing to do? Yes. But you know, it's very complicated when we start to have these discussions in Wisconsin, because here in Wisconsin, we don't do anything to recognize the rights of same-sex couples legally. We don't. So the whole issue of the city doing due diligence to make sure that it really is insuring people who are the domestic partners and who really are the children of these individuals, who, if these couples split up, that there are changes that are made so they're off the health insurance of their former partner, that those things have to be done. That's a complicated thing for governmental bodies to do, because...
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
When all throughout my working career, whenever I got insurance and put down my dependents and my family, no one ever investigated to see if those children were really mine or if my wife was really my wife. Yeah, the fact that people would even say, well, we can't trust these people, to be honest, the way we have people we've covered in the past.
It's not a matter of trust. It's a matter of the fact that in this state, because we don't recognize same-sex relationships, there are not the same things that people can produce that you can if you do when you're married.
No, I'm not trying to be incendiary, but if you ask the people of Milwaukee, should the same-sex partners of retirees get health benefits that they don't get now, would the people of Milwaukee say, yeah, sure, that's the right thing to do?
I bet if you put that to a referendum, they'd say no, and it's not because people hate gays or think gays are weird or from another planet. That has nothing to do with this argument. It has to do with fiscal responsibility, and as Denise Callaway correctly alluded to, affordability. The biggest cost for municipal governments is the price of human capital. And I had no idea that the city of Milwaukee was so fiscally strong now that its bonding rating overnight just improved, and that they've got all this money to throw around that they're not going to be able to use now for police, fire, sanitation, and other services. I don't think they can afford it. And what is the price? How many are going to benefit from this? We don't know. I know it's sweeping across the country in cities all across America. I understand that, but the concern is cost and potential fraud and abuse.
15 seconds.
The Wisconsin Constitution does not recognize any marriage other than that between a man and a woman. This is a circuitous route to get around providing those benefits to those couples that are not acknowledged by the Constitution.
All right. You know, some people build model airplanes for a hobby. Other people hang out in Farmville. Rick Horowitz spends a lot of his time searching for logical consistency. Lately, he's been having a hard time of it. Rick.
Well, so much for Anglo-Saxon myth's special relationship with the Brits. And that's all I'll say about that. I try never to make a presidential candidate look ridiculous on foreign soil, especially when he's doing such a fine job of it himself. So let's talk about a different sport, a non-Olympic sport, mental gymnastics. Politicians twisting themselves into pretzels, trying to reconcile the irreconcilable. And two of the biggest mental gymnastic events, voting rights and gun rights, ballots and bullets. Now, the people trying to restrict voting rights these days to make it harder for certain groups of people to vote this November, they say they're doing it to prevent voter fraud. If even one fraudulent ballot is cast, they like to say, then the entire process is flawed. People's confidence in the system will be shattered. So to prevent that one fraudulent ballot, they're putting up extra high hurdles to legitimate voters. New ID requirements, shorter periods for early voting, those sorts of things. To prevent that one fraudulent ballot, in other words, they're willing to turn away thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of perfectly eligible voters. I don't know about you, but that's the kind of system that would shatter my confidence. Meanwhile, as officials in Pennsylvania, for instance, admitted just this week, they have absolutely no evidence of the kind of in-person voter fraud that ID laws are supposedly targeted at. Doesn't matter. There's nothing broken, but they're determined to fix it. That's ballots. Bullets are another matter. When it comes to bullets and the weapons that fire them, there's plenty that's broken, assuming you don't consider periodic mass murder an acceptable part of American life. But when anyone even suggests trying to ramp down the rampages, no AK-47s for agitated Andy, say, or something less than 6,000 rounds of ammunition in your personal arsenal, well, that's when the mental gymnastics really kick in. These new laws wouldn't stop every Virginia Tech, they argue, or every Tucson, or every Aurora. They won't make all the bad things go away, so let's not do anything. Get it? Stopping even one bad ballot? They're hot to trot. But preventing some portion of the killings? Suddenly they're couch potatoes. It's gold medal hypocrisy.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.